There are several ways to obtain a realistic corpse. One, you could shell out a lot of money to buy a commercial one. Two, you could build your own like we'll be showing you. Or three, well, that's not legal. Anyway, let's begin with the materials needed for building your own. The finished product will only be as good as the skeleton you're building upon. The best skeletons for your money are from the Anatomical Chart Company at www.anatomical.com. This is a 4th class Bucky skeleton, which means that it has minor defects. The price is right, the quality is second to none, and the minor defects will be covered over during the corpsing process. First off, you're going to need approximately 1 gallon of mass-grade latex to complete a full-size corpse, several bags of cotton balls, 4 to 5 bags of stretchable polyester spider webbing. You want to pick up a couple different colors of latex paint, gel super glue, and you're also going to need to get an assortment of drywall screws. Okay, your first step on a new skeleton would be to remove some of the unnecessary hardware. Okay, we're going to start up here at the top, and we're going to unscrew the little cap that you use for hanging it up. Now there's also a nut and a piece of all thread that goes all the way down through the skeleton. You're going to unscrew that nut, pull off the top. Now from the inside, there's little nuts that hold these screws on. You're going to take the springs off of the jaw. And to do this, we're just using a little tiny jeweler's screwdriver. And on the jaw, we're just going to remove the hardware from that too. Okay, set that aside. There's a hook on the side of the skull cap. You're going to take that off because we're going to super glue the skull cap back down into place. Okay, your next step is going to be to remove the pivot joint that holds the arm bones to the shoulder blades. Just kind of unscrew these. Pull out the pin. Now you may choose to leave these on if you want to have your skeleton a little more flexible for doing different poses. But what I like to do is I like to take all the hardware off that's not needed, and I like to assemble them in a preformed pose and then corpse it that way. Gives the skeleton a little more of a realistic look, in my opinion, than just a hanging skeleton on a wall. Okay, the next step is down here where the legs meet the hips. You want to undo the nut that's holding that on and pull off the legs. Okay, and then up here, it's holding the 2 halves of the hip together. You're going to take this pin out also, and you're going to replace it with a drywall screw. It'll be less obvious that there's a piece of hardware holding these together. So set that aside. To remove the pin and the cap that holds the hip to the spine bone, and I'm going to reattach the hip back to the spine with a drywall screw. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, inside the pelvic area of the hips, there's a couple nuts in here that you're going to want to tighten up, because we're going to leave them and we just want to make sure that they're tight enough that your skeleton won't fall apart later after you have it finished. These nuts normally get loosened up during shipping. Tighten up the little brass screws and nuts that have loosened up during shipping. There's quite a few of them, so it might take a little bit of time, but it's important to do it. Otherwise, you're going to have a skeleton and that's going to just not hold together well. Now, some of these might be missing the nuts on them. If one or two are missing, that's not going to affect it very much. Also, tighten up the little screws that hold the shoulder blades to the ribs. Now we're working on the arms. Where the elbow is, there's a couple of screws in there that you want to tighten down. Make sure that they don't come apart later on. And then there's a couple down at the hand that you want to tighten up. Now you don't have to tighten them really tight. Just want to make sure that they're not going to pull out. Still want to have a little bit of flexibility in them so that it'll be easier to pose your skeleton later whenever you're getting ready to corpse it. Okay, again, same with the legs. You're going to want to go over the screws that are on it just to make sure that they're holding the parts together. Normally the legs are in pretty good shape whenever they come in. Up here there's a pivot joint. Just want to make sure that that's not pulling out of the two bones. It's pretty good. Okay, back up to the head. We're going to reattach our skull cap again, and I'm going to put some super glue on the little pins that go down into the rest of the skull. A few daubs here and there. Okay, you're going to want to make sure that that rod that's inside comes back out. And you're going to put the nut back on. Tighten it down. Now if you're going to be planning on hanging this back up on a wall for display, you can put the other brass cap that was originally with it, but I like to leave it off. Just looks a little bit better, and it's easier to hide that nut than that whole big brass cap. Okay, you might notice that a few of the teeth are removable on the lower jaw. You can leave them in if you want, just super glue them back in, or you can take them out. And a little bit later we're going to be work on these teeth to make them look a little more rotted out. Now we're going to reattach the jaw. We're going to use a drywall screw. We're going to be putting one in right here and then up into there, and same on the other side. You can pose the jaw however you want. You can have it partly open or you can have it closed. For this particular demonstration, I'm going to have it closed. Okay, one final step on the legs before you can mount them. You have to remove the threaded pin that was holding it on originally. They just turn out with a pair of pliers. Okay, we've already attached the legs. All we did was just screwed the leg bone to the hips in 2 places on each side, just using an 1 5/8" drywall screw. And you don't have to worry about it getting the leg back here into the socket of the hip because most of that's going to be covered over anyhow. Okay, next we're going to attach the arms, and I'm going to attach these so that they're in a begging position. Okay, once we got it attached up here at the top, we're going to attach it down onto the leg bone again. Make sure you have this where you want it. At this point, you want to go over the prop one more time and make sure that it's going to be rigid enough to support its own weight. We've attached the ankles down here with a long drywall screw, and we did the same up here at the knees and the arms. Next, we're going to be doing a little bit of dental work. We're going to distress these teeth with a Dremel tool. Alright, we're now ready to begin the corpsing process, and we're going to start off using some cotton balls, and we're going to fill in around the eyes and the nose, and we're going to fill in the voids around the jawbone, and underneath here we're going to pack it all with cotton and a little bit of latex dipped on each cotton ball. So just basically you dip it in, you work in some latex. You want to saturate them pretty well, you don't want them too dry. Start up here. Here we're working on the eyeball sockets. What you're doing here is putting in a hunk of cotton and you're kind of just tearing at it with a pointed screwdriver. I'm using an ice pick. It just adds a little bit of texture in there and kind of simulates maybe a rotted eyeball in there or something. Okay, now up here on the top where that bolt is, you're going to want to mask that. So we're going to take a cotton ball dipped in some latex and cover it over, kind of smooth it out so that it's not as noticeable. Now you want to unroll some cotton balls into strips. We're going to be taking these strips and we're going to be building up the bridge of the nose. We're going to be building a lip line on the top and lower jaw, and we're going to be filling in right underneath where the jaw meets the rest of the skull. Okay, once you've gotten this far, you want to continue to work over top of the skull to cover it up to create a rotted skin effect. And this doesn't have to be perfect because this is just the base. We're going to be applying the polyester spider webbing over top of this. Now we're going to fill in the joints. We're going to fill in around the knees, we're going to fill in around the elbows, and up here at the wrists, and up here by the shoulders, just to add a little bit of bulk to it so it's not so bony. And try not to blend them together too much. Try to keep them as separate bones. You don't want the arm bone to suddenly become part of the leg bone with too much packing in it. This will also help hide some of the hardware that wasn't removed and some of the screw heads that you installed. You want to make sure you cover over the little acorn nut that's on the front of the rib cage so that it's not as visible. Build it up a little bit with some cotton. Starting on the feet, we're going to cover over the ankles, and we're going to cover over these wires that are holding the toes together. Another thing you want to do before you do this, make sure you have all the bones curving the right way so that the foot looks like it's not all contorted. Have all the joints filled in and the feet are filled in. We left the hands go because we're going to use this stretchable spider webbing to do the hands. Now, I tore a bunch of pieces already off because once you get your hands full of latex, it's really hard to tear this stuff off of a full bat of it. So we'll just begin with a small piece, and you're just dipping this in the latex, same as you did your cotton. Now this stuff is nice because you can pull on it and get some really nasty looking skin type textures. And we're going to start by putting this one on the hand. This also takes a little bit of time to get used to working with, but once you get used to it, you can do a lot of nice stuff with it. Depending on how you want your corpse to look and the degree of rot you want it to appear to have, you can leave holes in places so that you can see the bone structure underneath, or you can cover it over more to give it a younger appearance, like it hasn't been dead for very long. Alright, we're adding a little bit inside here to simulate some rot dripping down from his insides. Again, the degree of how much you add is up to you. put a piece now over the face to add a little bit of character to the cotton that you already put on there. Alright, your next step is to take half of a cotton ball, and we're going to put some ears on the sides of the head, and just making a small curlicue, nothing perfect, just something that would represent where an ear used to be. Most of this is finished. What you want to do is go over the entire prop and look for little areas that might not be quite happy with, and just kind of either stretch the material over them a little bit more, or take and get a little bit additional and put it on there, and just work on it until you're happy with it. Then you're going to want to let this dry overnight until all the latex dries, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, I applied 2 additional coats of liquid latex to the corpse using a 2-inch disposable paintbrush, and in the process of doing so I didn't like the way the hands were looking, so I repositioned them holding this metal lantern. Alright, we're ready to begin the painting process. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be darkening in all the voids, the eyes, the nose, inside the mouth. We're also going to do up underneath the rib cage. To do this, we're going to use an airbrush, but you can also go out and get yourself a small touch-up brush and do the same thing, but an airbrush works a lot better. Alright, we're beginning with the eyes, and you're just darkening in the inside. And we're going to work on the nose. Darkening inside the jaw here. This is where an airbrush really works well. Okay, you can also adjust your airbrush a little bit and blow just a little bit of black above the teeth line. This will help hide a lot of the wires and connectors that you can't really remove. All right, now we're taking a 2-inch paintbrush and we're dipping it in dark brown paint, and we're going over the prop with not a whole lot of paint, but we're trying to fill in all the rotted skin areas. And we're going to try to keep it off of any of the exposed skeleton. You're not really putting this on real thick, but you're still trying to cover the latex color over. This is just one of the first colors that we're going to use. I like to start with the darker colors and work up to the lighter ones. Another technique you can use different kinds of stains and either spray them on or brush them on and then rub them all off. I like to use latex paints, and then I'm going to go over this with an airbrush later and show you another technique. Okay, now we're going to do basically the same thing. We're going to go back over the whole prop with a lighter shade, and this is going to bring out all the fine detail on the rotted pieces of skin. It's also going to bring out some of the bone structure. Okay, the last step of our painting process involves the airbrush again. We're going to be using a flat black, and what we're going to do is we're going to just blow black over top of the skeleton, and we're going to wipe it off with a dry rag real quick after we put it on. to be sure you have enough black paint that will wipe off without wiping off the color underneath. But if you do wipe off the color underneath, like I did there, just spray some more black on it lightly and it'll hide that. All right, we changed colors in our airbrush and we added a little bit of white, and we are now going to just barely highlight the teeth. Then we're going to go back over with a little bit of black and darken them up again. This will help them stand out a little bit better in a dark area. Okay, back to black paint. One final thought on the shade of your prop. If you don't like how dark it is and you don't think you're going to be able to see it in the haunt that you're using in, or yard or whatever you're putting it in, you can lighten it up with a little bit of tan in your airbrush. Okay, this next step is putting hair on your corpse. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but we're going to show you how. You take a long section of hair, and this is just hair you can buy at a cosmetic place, or you can buy it from a lot of online Halloween stores, and you're applying it to the head with some latex. And you just dabbing it on. Moving it around until you find a position that you like. And you're not going to get all the strands to stick. You're going to have ones that just refuse to stay on there. But once this dries, you can go and you can arrange this hairdo however you like. Right after you have the latex on your hair and it's dried, you need to touch the color back up again so that it blends back into the scalp, and the easiest way to do that is just use an airbrush and just fade it right back in.